What is it going to take to make true transformational change? We are going to unpack that in this 45 segment experience that we're going to have together. We have over 100 of us, about 100 of us gathered here today, a subset of this great conference that we've been experiencing so far. So we have a lot to unpack, and we're going to just go ahead and dig right in. The topic today is, what are the things that we need to do to inspire transformational change in our organization? So I want to give a little background. First of all, my name is Sesha. I'll be your facilitator. I'm from On the Mark Consulting. We are located right here in Western New York, and we do all kinds of talent work with teams and individuals, and are fascinated and want to participate in organizational work that has to do with people being at their best and powering together to accomplish great things. So what I want to also do is set the tone for our time together. Typically in a conference, there's parts where there's the keynote speaker. This is a breakout. So I want to encourage community in our chat. So normally there's no talking during a speaker or a presentation, but in this case, chat it up. I want a dual dialogue going on here between what I have to share, but what all of you are thinking about as we're hearing things, resources that you might have, ideas. Also, here's a practice for our group today. Put a +1 and a person's name if you like something that they shared, or if I said something, or there's a slide or a concept that you really want to give a thumbs up to or a big applause to. +1, and then share the person who made the comment, the concept, whatever it is. So I'd like to see our chat just lit up through our entire session. We welcome that. So we're making progress. I think this conference alone is in its maybe second or third year, and we've had unprecedented amount of attendance coming out in droves in Western New York. As a nation, we are making progress in our efforts with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're making progress in two ways. We know that this work requires operationalizing things, putting things in place to do the work of DE&I in our organizations, whether it's creating a dashboard or starting to measure things, or like we've never seen before, job postings went up this year for diversity, chief diversity officer, diversity manager, diversity associate. We're standing up a function in organizations that didn't occur before, that never occurred before. Those are signs that the progress we're making, we know that we have to put things in place, and we're operationalizing it. But we also know that this work requires that we are transforming as well. And by transforming, that means getting people to think and act differently. And we in our consultancy are seeing a shift across the country. When we are speaking with companies from around the world that are leaders in this work, we are noticing that the second wave from the 18 months of surge that we saw 18 months ago, when we all experienced a movement that made us motivated like we've never been before for this work, we experienced a surge. But now there has been a shift and a second wave of interest, and you'll probably notice it in this conference. There's attention now being focused on the transformation work that needs to take place. And we know we've definitely have to put things in place and get people to think and act differently. So in chat, as you think about your organizations over the last year, over the last 18 months, maybe even longer, if I said that this dollar represents how much effort and time and energy and dollar resource your organization has placed to make progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion, how much of that dollar was spent on operationalizing, putting things in place, creating systems, processes. Putting things in place means we are now looking at new sources for sourcing new hires in our company. Putting things in place might be, actually, we put a more mixed, diverse group of people together. That's getting us putting things in place to become a diverse and inclusive culture, versus what the other work is once we bring those people together, once we resource candidates from different sources, how we interact with what we've put in place, we're doing it because we're thinking and acting differently as we're doing it. So share with us in chat how much of that dollar in your organization. Think about that. What has happened in this moment in time? Like no other moment in history, we have always had builders, those who have been dedicated and working and pushing hard for diversity, equity, inclusion in their organizations. They've always been there. But this moment, like no other, we have had a surge of believers, new believers, who value this work, who are giving it a big yes, want to come out in droves. There's been I was just reading a recent employee survey, and it said something like 92% of employees that were surveyed across a cross-section of companies believe that their employer should be investing and doing things to ensure that their workplace is more diverse and inclusive. So those are numbers on a question like that we've never seen before. And of course, there's always been the unconvinced, and we know that our efforts spent there will gain little return. But the believers, the new people who are coming out in droves now, passionate, are joining the ranks, that is where transformational change can really take place. It's with those believers. So how do we move those who are coming out in droves, the believers? How do we move the believers from being believers to becoming builders? This was a term that was coined by Professor Dolly Chugg from NYU. And I think you've all seen the believers in your organizations. What we see is when we're forming employee resource groups and people are coming out, they're raising their hands to participate. We are holding learning, cultural fluency, learning seminars, webinars. In our community here today, we are holding a diversity and inclusion symposium that has had attendance like no other. We are starting diversity and equity committees, and people, one of the big problems that our clients share with us is they had too many people volunteer, and they don't know how to handle telling people that it's not possible to have the entire company be part of a committee, a task force. But the challenge here is when we think about transformational change, how do we move all of those people who are saying, yes, this really matters, to being people who are contributing to think and act differently in ways that are going to make a real difference and change. And our belief alone, our belief in that this really matters, just sitting there and stopping at that point is not enough. And we know that it won't change our organizations. It's great. And it feels really good right now. But what we're going to unpack together today is what a growth mindset does and how it can help transformation with transformation. So I'm just curious, has anybody heard of the model of a fixed and growth mindset? It's used a lot. It's used in education and it's used in sports. But I want to talk very specifically about some of the science behind it and why it can be a really powerful tool to look at for creating transformational change with diversity, equity, and inclusion in an organization. So if you've heard of it, just tell us in chat, what do you know of it? In what realm? So I have a few that say yes, they have heard of it, and others say they're waiting and they're interested to learn. Excellent. Well, growth mindset was actually studied, and it's a way of thinking when you think about a challenge. And we know that if you're a believer, that there's a challenge that you have to undergo to grow and learn. So that's a challenge. We know if you're an organization, the organization is going to experience challenge. Just being excited and knowing that and valuing this work and being passionate about it is not enough. It's going to take deep, hard, challenging work to get there. So a growth mindset has been proven. When you have a growth mindset versus the opposite, which is a fixed mindset, your ability to succeed and conquer a challenge is so much greater. Over and over again, it's proven. Because we know that if you want to be successful at a challenge, it's not a straight path. It's not do step A and then you grow, and step B and then you grow. It looks more like this. There are setbacks. There are pieces that feel tangled, messy, hurtful. You can't even tell if you're moving upward or not. And nowhere in any kind of challenge, and believe me, we know challenge, we're all coming out of a pandemic, but in nowhere will we experience these dips, these moments of disorientation, these challenges within our effort to stumble forward and upward in our challenge. This is the reality of what a challenge looks like, but particularly the reality. So what a growth mindset does is help you power through a challenge that looks like this, and it will dramatically improve your ability to succeed. So we're going to unpack what a fixed mindset and what a growth mindset looks like. And the thing is, each one of us may be predisposed to be in one versus the other, or certain situations put us into a fixed, where other situations contextually might make us very comfortable to be in a growth mindset, even though we have fixed mindset tendencies. But the thing here is, and we'll talk about this later, is we have the ability, just simply by monitoring where we are and being intentional about moving ourselves over into the growth side, we greatly do ourselves a service by increasing our chances of growing and succeeding at a challenge. So athletes, students have proven this over and over again. So let's kind of look at what the difference is of what goes on in these mindsets. So I'm going to have Umar help me a little bit. So if I have a fixed mindset, I really believe that anything I do is a symptom or it shows whether I'm good or not. So if I try something or do something and fail at it or do well at it, it means that I'm good. But in a fixed mindset,
it's that I'm improving.
Yes. So versus I'm good, in a fixed mindset, a growth mindset is thinking I'm improving. In a fixed mindset, I believe that my ability is fixed, it's there. And when I do something, I'm demonstrating what's already existing. So I'm performing or I'm doing a challenge with everything that I have. But a growth mindset believes
my ability can grow.
So my ability is not fixed. And what I just did is showing me something about my ability, and it can grow. In a fixed mindset, negative feedback is a report on my ability. It's actually telling me. But in a growth,
negative feedback is a direction for growth.
In a fixed, I excel by using what I already know. In a growth,
I make progress when learning new things.
In a fixed, if I need extra help or if I have to work extra hard, it means I failed at this. It's an indicator that I'm not good. I don't like that. But in a growth mindset,
putting in extra effort is how I grow.
So those are the two differences. We're going to do some work with this. We're going to reflect on it a little bit. So if you want to take a screenshot here or maybe pull out your phones, that could be helpful. But I want each of you, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to think about a current challenge that you are facing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's a personal challenge in your organization or you're dealing with it at a company level. And as you're doing that, what is your attitude about it? Think that at this moment in time, your mindset about that particular challenge. Are you more fixed? Or are you thinking about and approaching that challenge in a growth way? How are you approaching it? Go through each one of those. Fix or growth. All right, we've got some comments coming through where people have done an inventory. Definitely growth. And it's not a bad thing. Many times we're in fixed, but it's an opportunity to monitor. All right, I'm going to bring you all back. And Amr is going to give me back the screen share as I bring you back. Let's take a quick poll. As you think about that challenge, where were you? In a minute here, we'll see how we did as a group. All right. So it looks like as a group, there was really none of us with the particular challenge that were sitting strongly in the fixed side. Some of us recognized that we were somewhat fixed. Others were unsure, but a majority of us, more than half of us, felt that we were somewhat in growth, with another 20% feeling strongly that they were in a growth mindset about their challenge, which is excellent. We're going to talk about What are 3 habits now? 3 habits that you can practice to have a growth mindset. The first one is monitor. Start to notice when you're about to take on a challenge or when something feels really hard. When you feel like, remember that arrow that I showed that went straight up? When you feel like you're in one of those tangled points, that's a time to stop and notice. How am I thinking about this challenge? Go through it. So we just modeled the habit. Number 1, we did it. We practiced it together. The second one is to really figure out how to promote feedback. Feedback and how it relates to a growth mindset. So promoting quality feedback. Just think about it for a second. What is the outcome that we want when we give quality feedback? What is it? What's our end game? Why are we even doing it? Because let's face it, giving someone feedback, that's not an easy lift, and it's heavy emotional labor. A lot of times that's why we opt not to do it. Even though we know we want to do it, we choose not to. But what do you think the end game is? If anyone has any thoughts to share in chat, what are we after? Especially when we're giving it. When we're giving feedback, what we're after, let's see, improve their performance, understanding and acceptance, spark action, reinforce positive habits. Yes, 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 and yes. All of that, of what we said, we're after growth. We want someone to take our feedback and think and act differently as a result of it. And everything that you just shared in chat will happen if someone takes feedback and thinks and acts differently. When we give it and when we receive it, it's, if we're in a growth mindset, then that's how we receive it. That how can I use this as information that will inform me how to think and act differently in support of me learning and improving? So in giving it is, how can I give it in support of somebody taking it in a way that is going to make them think and act differently in support of their improvement or our improvement as a team or as a culture or as an organization. Feedback. So I want to talk just for a brief moment here about feedback, and I'm going to get a little geeky, a little sciencey here. But what happens in our brains when we process feedback like that? We have a part of our brain that is the threat part of our brain. It's called the amygdala. And when that part of our brain is ignited, it triggers a fight, flight, or freeze, a very protective, self-preservation reaction in us. And when that's happening, our brains are designed to connect us. We are able to take in information from a fear-based perspective because we're trying to protect ourselves and we're scanning for threat because we've detected something's going to go wrong. However, when we are taking in information and the prefrontal cortex or the creative or learning part of our brain is activated, we feel safe, and we also feel that what we're hearing is in favor of our growth, and we're able to, this part of the brain can actually process new ways of thinking and can process and contemplate using the new ways of thinking to act differently. We're more open to change and we're more open to ideas. So it goes without saying that whichever side of our brain is in control as we are receiving feedback is greatly going to determine our ability to think and act differently. So what I want to present you with today are two different as a model, a framework for feedback. And this is feedback that will cultivate growth mindset in you. If you're the giver, you're giving conditions by following this quality feedback framework. You're setting the stage for the person to receive it in the right part of their brain, the part that will help them grow and learn from it. And so I want you to imagine, we talk about being a great ally. We talk about, helping others learn and see things that they don't see. We talk about microaggressions and how we need to address those in our organization. We talk about people who are not from marginalized groups having blind spots and not being able to see things, and they need to have their eyes open. All of that, we count on feedback. So imagine that you're in one of those moments and you need to give somebody feedback. So I want you to take yourselves there. And here are the steps. Pretend that there's a counselor in your head in that moment. Here's what the steps are. Check your intention. What is your intention for giving this feedback? Why? What are you asking? What is your end game? Is it to think and act differently? And if so, what? In what ways? The first thing is acknowledge their good intention, because 90% of the time, 95% of the time, and even I would say 99% of the time, their intention was good. Acknowledge it, because guess what? By doing that, we are increasing our chances of igniting the non-threat part of their brain. As soon as we acknowledge bring that right out in the open. I know you probably didn't realize. I know this is the last thing that you would have intended, but the impact was. Describe the behavior or act. What was it that they did without judgment? Don't put blame or judgment. Don't say that was a racist comment that has a judgment attached to it. You can say you made a comment that was X, and the impact was that I felt that it landed on me. How? Talk about the impact and remove blame or judgment where you can. If you do this, you are setting up the conditions for that person to receive in the way that is going to best enable them to change and grow. And so let's flip the coin here. Suppose you are an enthusiastic believer. You are one of the allies, the good guys, the inspired ones. You're signing up for it. You are voting for it. But somebody sees that you're not getting it, or that what you did was actually harmful, and that you have a blind spot that you're not seeing, and somebody is about to give you feedback. So there's a counselor in your head in this moment, and this is what they're saying. Stop. Whoever it is, give them your full attention. Drop the phone. Stop typing. Look directly into the camera. If this is happening virtually, give them your full attention. Listen. Steady yourself. And the first thing to say is, thank you. I'm so thankful that you pointed that out, or thank you for that feedback. Resist the urge, because it will be there to defend your actions. That's not what I meant. You know my intentions. Stay in the moment, and instead replace those talking points to defend where you were coming from, to explain what your intention was, to possibly explain how they should have interpreted it in alignment with your intention. Stop and rather ask questions. I'm sorry that that was hurtful, and I want to learn more. I want to understand more. So then you're setting them up to be able to give you, you're actually giving yourself permission, and you're nudging yourself into a growth mindset, because you're saying feedback is coming. It is not a judgment on my ability to be a believer and a part of this mission. I'm not going to stay there. I'm not going to hold that thought and hijack this opportunity for me to understand something that I didn't understand before and do and think differently. So there you go, feedback model. And we talked about the third habit, a focus on learning. That's what a growth mindset does. So how do you create habits? 4, it's bringing into regular dialogue. How have I improved? Growth-minded people, they're monitoring learning. They're not necessarily saying, am I perfect now? How good am I? They're saying, if I compare myself to where I was a month ago, maybe a week ago, 18 months ago, in what ways have I improved? They're constantly looking and measuring improvement, not necessarily over-focusing on how good am I, what was my grade as a DEI success. How big is my DEI halo that I'm walking around in this organization with? It's how does it look compared to what it looked like? What new things am I doing and thinking about differently? They also think about not everything that they know and living out what they know. So it's basically, I've learned these things and I'm going to think and act on them alone. But they're also equally as concerned about and thinking actively about, what don't I know yet? So I improved my ability to really understand what's happening with Blacks in our country, what the history is, and how that might be affecting the culture that we're trying to create. How do those things tie together? Yet, I have not done any work to learn about what it's like to be an Asian American, not only in our country, but then again, to use that knowledge to say what is that like in our. So we're celebrating how we've improved, but we're also thinking about, what don't I know? And the word yet, we use it as a powerful thing because it's signaling to us that we're going to learn it. It's not, what don't I know? Uh-oh, it's a deficiency and I need to worry and feel threatened by it. Threatened that I'm going to be exposed as someone who's only knows this but doesn't know this. It's, what don't I know yet? That yet is powerful. It's a mindset for learning. And think about, what have I learned from getting it wrong? In this work especially, and I know from personal experience from getting it wrong, there is a pain and a feeling of not wanting to get back up and wanting to retreat from it. But growth-mindedness can help you say, no, if I really want to be a builder, a believer that's a builder, I don't get to turn this off, because at this point it feels uncomfortable to me. My comfort is no longer there. I keep going. And that is my attitude about this whole endeavor, and my role in it is that I have to learn. I want to learn from getting it wrong. So focus on learning. And one other thing here too is audit. What are you learning? Where are you learning from? What kind of, for example, what kind of things are you feeding yourself with? What kind of social media feeds are you looking at? What type of papers, books, movies are you consuming? Who are you learning from through others? Is it diverse enough? Are there areas where you don't know about groups yet that you might want to consider growing into? So focus on learning. And I know that when we started this talk, it was about how to create an organizational for transformation. But when we create a bunch of individuals that are growing and learning, what happens is the focus on learning becomes how these are the kinds of conversations that now teams are asking. How have we improved? What don't we know yet as a company? Where are we weak in our understanding of what the problems are or what improvements need to be made? What have we learned from getting it wrong? And if you are a leader and you are listening to this, one of the strongest things that you can do is not take unconscious bias training or form a D&I committee in your organization, but one of the most powerful things you could do to set your organization on a path to be growth-minded is to put your own learning on display, to say, what have I learned from either getting it wrong or in what ways have I personally improved? And what things do I not know yet, but I will make a commitment to learn them? Doing that sets the tone. So by modeling it, we then become organizations that are growth-minded. So that's a lot that we unpacked, but I did want to tell you that there are 2 resources that if you are looking to deepen your learning of. One is the mindset. The scientist and brilliant professor Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, which really talks about all the research and science of how powerful growth mindset is for overcoming and being successful in challenges. But then it's like a 1-2 amazing punch of these 2 brilliant women. Professor Dolly Chugg wrote a book that actually talks about growth mindset and how to apply it, and her thoughts and research around what it can do for your diversity and inclusion efforts. So it was a combination of both of those works that strongly propelled me and influenced some of the subject that we talked about today. So Amr is going to share links to both of these books with you in chat, so you have those as you are heading out of the session. But I do want to just open it up. We have a few minutes left if anybody wants to offer any questions. Andrea, I know that we weren't quite sure if we'd have a few minutes for some questions, Andrea and Anne. But if anyone does have questions or thoughts or comments, if you want to share something in chat that has inspired you over the last 45 minutes to think differently about just anything, something you may have seen in the chat coming through. Something I may have said that sparked something for you, just even something you did on your own as you thought about a D&I challenge and whether you were in fixed or growth mindset.
Sesha, can you tell us a little bit about your journey from where you started thinking about this idea about fixed and growth?
Yeah, for me, it was very personal. I started this, and it wasn't, I've personally realized the power of this model when it was not in the context of diversity, equity, inclusion. It was kind of in the context of me growing as a professional and really dealing with severe anxiety in the workplace. And when I saw this model, a lot of things clicked for me, because I realized that I suffered very much from what a lot of you may know the term imposter syndrome. And so I applied this model to that, because everything I did, I thought was going to expose me as a failure. So very much stuck me into the fixed mindset of, I better be good and perfect in this thing that I'm doing out of the gate. I didn't give myself the grace and the space to be in a learning mode, because I was so afraid to do that, thinking that by being a learner, I am an imposter. So it just immediately clicked and opened up so much for me. And I realized I am a scientist. If you study my bio, if anyone's research, I have a science background, and the whole idea of the research, that it actually, there's reams and reams of research that shows chances of success at a challenge are so much better, greatly increased if you adapt a growth mindset. So it is the work I do every day. I work on it every day. I catch myself in fixed. I think I'm more prone to a fixed mindset naturally, or however I grew to be a person in this world. I am someone who has a propensity for fixed. So that noticing step, the habit that I talked about, it's a big one for me. It's a part of my daily practice.
Sure. We had a question come through the chat, and I thought this was part of where you were talking about giving and receiving. And so any advice on how to deliver a thoughtful and constructive feedback, like wording or timing? There's so much that goes into, giving that or talking to people and giving them feedback.
Well, we wanted to share that framework with you, because we really think that it literally gives a step-by-step. But what I'd recommend, because it's a new habit and it's uncomfortable, but we know in order for this work to succeed, we know we have to do the transformational part of it. And we know that feedback has to be a big part of that. We can't write a policy. We can't create a new talent acquisition process that's going to make people act and think differently. We can't course correct when someone's biases that's unconscious to them are on display without feedback. So I would suggest, there's lots of really good feedback models out there. This one, we went across models and really thought about it through the lens of diversity and inclusion, through microaggressions, allyship. But whatever model you choose, practice, be deliberate, be intentional, be brave on both sides of giving it and receiving it. And the best advice I can give you is, when you're doing it, have a growth mindset. I'm learning. Okay, what went well? Did I do that feedback well? You know what? No, I messed it up, but you know what? I gave feedback, so I'm improving, because in years past, I wouldn't have said anything. So, and receiving it too. Did I receive that well? Did I learn from it? Did I get defensive? Did I take it in? Did I challenge it too hardly without looking at my own blind spots? I'm not sure, but I'm thinking about it. How could I do that better next time? So practice, be intentional, and have a growth mindset about giving it and receiving it. We need grace in this space. I know there's an urgency, but we need grace and space to do the proper hard and deep learning and change that's needed.
Well, thank you so much, Sesha. We really appreciate you joining us today. Anybody have any other comments you'd like to make for Sesha? We're just about out of time and going back to the main stage, or you can join one of them other micro sessions.
Last comment. This is my favorite part of the session, because I actually get to see you all. I was busy with my slides and my timing and everything, but it's so nice to see everybody as we exit out. So nice to see a lot of you again.
Great. Thank you, Sesha. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.